Welcome back to In Pursuit 360. Today we're going to be talking about use of force in law enforcement. All right, here we go. Use of force. So I'm not talking today about any specific cases or anything like that. I'm talking about the use of force continuum, or the steps or levels of force that exist out there that are used by officers to guide their decision making in certain circumstances as to what types of force are permissible or how they should work. So I'm not sure exactly how it's being taught in current local academies. I know that the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center has done away with the 5 levels or the use of force continuum. They believe that it is mistraining officers into thinking that they have to go through each step before they're allowed to escalate all the way up. So my argument with the Law Enforcement Training Center was that, well, then it just wasn't being taught right. I like the regular use of force continuum that has the 5 levels. I think it is very easy to understand. It's easy to explain if you take the time to do it. So let's get into it. 5 levels of the use of force, and actually they kind of added 6 with the introduction of OC spray and tasers, but I'll tell you where that fits in. So the very first level of the use of force is presence. You just show up. You're in uniform, you show up at a call, you show up on a scene, and you're there. This is why agencies stress the importance of officers' appearance. Your uniform should be sharp. It should be ironed or pressed. Your shoes should be clean, shiny if they're shiny. If you're wearing boots, they should be clean and presentable. If most departments, I don't know about most departments, my sheriff's office required us to wear our hats. State police require their troopers to wear their hats every time they get out of the car. Well, there's a reason for it. There is an appearance. When you're wearing that hat, it's kind of like drill instructors in the military, right? So 1, it makes you appear taller. 2, it gives you that look of an authority. It's kind of hard to explain, but if you take a look at 2 officers from the same department standing side by side, one's wearing their hat and one's not, tell me which one tends to look a little more intimidating. It's probably going to be the guy that's wearing his hat if the rest of his uniform is squared away. So presence is your very first level in the use of force. Your appearance, the way you carry yourself, your look can sometimes be enough to bring things under control without causing any issues. So next we'll go to verbal. Verbal is step number 2. The way that you talk to people, the commands you give, or the way that you interact. I never showed up on a scene where I was like, I said get down now, and I yell at them. I always start off calm. You can get more flies with honey than you can with vinegar, right? So why do you want to go in there spewing a bunch of vinegar and get everybody riled up when the whole idea is to calm the situation down? Some people call it verbal judo, or I don't know, different communications terms and all that stuff. But it's really about staying calm, being fair, and giving people a chance to speak. The whole idea of a law enforcement officer showing up on any scene whatsoever is they're supposed to listen to the sides or listen to what's going on and make a determination as to either who's right, who's wrong, or if a law's been broken. So you can't do that if you don't know how to communicate. And even if you show up to, let's say, a hot domestic where both subjects are just really irate and yelling and screaming and hollering, you got to separate them, you have to calm them down, and then you have to get them to talk to you. I very simply would explain to people, sir or ma'am. And yes, I use sir or ma'am all the time. Even if they're younger than me, it doesn't matter. I don't care. I don't care if I know that they have an extensive criminal history and they just killed a dog. It's going to be sir or ma'am. Sir or ma'am, I need to know what's going on here. You need to be able to speak to me and I will listen to you. So that's verbal. So presence, verbal. Now here's where the middle comes in. This is kind of where tasers and OC spray fall in, between steps 2 and 3. So step 3 is hands-on. So in between 2 and 3, and we'll call it 2.5, I guess, are going to be like OC spray and tasers. They've kind of determined that it's not always safe to go just straight from verbal to hands-on. If somebody's agitated, if they're making fists, if they're, saying they're not going to go to jail and you need to arrest them, why are you going to get into a punching match or a boxing match or a wrestling match with somebody when you can simply spray them or tase them, and then it's safer for the suspect that way and it's safer for the officer that way? So that's why we have those tools of OC spray and tasers, is to reduce the risk, not just for the officer, but for the suspect. So if an officer is talking to somebody and they're being a little defiant or whatever, and you hear about them spraying them with OC spray, pepper spray, or tasing them and never even tried to put the cuffs on them, don't instantly think that that officer is a bad guy. That officer is trying to save that suspect from getting hurt and himself. Hey, we're a little selfish. We want to go home in one piece every night too. But the idea of the OC and the taser are to help make sure that the suspect doesn't get hurt. Because if you get in a wrestling match with somebody and you're trying to use certain holds or pressure points and stuff like that, you can break an arm, dislocate a shoulder. I mean, there are a lot of injuries that can happen. So that's why those tools were introduced into law enforcement to begin with. All right, so that's step 2.5. So step 3 is hands-on. And here we're talking about actually putting your hands on somebody, where you actually have to, handcuff them. And it can go from something as simple as hands-on includes handcuffing, even compliant handcuffing. You are putting your hands on that person. So if you're putting your hands on that person, it's hands-on. That's a level of force. Also, if you're trying to gain control of them, let's say you've already pepper sprayed them, now you got to get them in cuffs, they're still resisting. So hands-on has everything to do with just putting your hands on somebody to try to control them in the situation. Then we move up to impact weapons. So they're holding, whatever. They don't want to go, or they've gone into a passive resistance where they're all clinched up tight and you can't get to them, but you've got to cuff them. You can actually use the impact weapons, and they're meant for stunning techniques, right? So you hit the meaty part of the leg, or you hit the meaty part of the arm. There are green, yellow, and red zones for impact weapons. And green zones are fine. Yellow zones can be dangerous, and red zones are considered deadly force. Now, could there be a time when an impact weapon is going to be used as deadly force and be justified? Sure, there can. Always if's the biggest little word in the dictionary, right? If frogs had wings, they wouldn't bump their little butts. So there can always be that chance when an impact weapon is appropriately used as deadly force. There are plenty of examples out there. I'm not going to go into them right now. Maybe I'll go back and cover each one of these subjects in a lot more detail. And then, of course, the fifth level of force is deadly force, which could be anything. The impact weapons to a red area, which would include the neck, the head, the sternum, the spine. There are plenty of red. There's some red areas there that can either cause death or serious bodily injury. Now, the use of deadly force isn't just what you're doing to them can kill them. It's also what you're doing to them can cause serious bodily injury or maiming or death, right? All three of those fall under deadly force. So anything that could potentially maim somebody or disable them and not just kill them is considered deadly force. Now, here's the trick. these 5 steps, or 6 if you count OC spray and tasers, right? If you count step 2.5, do not have to be followed in order. When an officer arrives at a scene, let's say it's a holdup at a store and the bad guy comes out with a gun, he doesn't have to sit there and do presence, verbal, then hands-on, then impact weapons. Oh, now we can go to deadly force. That's just not going to work. You can go from level 1 to level 5 in a heartbeat, just like you can go from level 5 down to level 3, right? You can go from use of deadly force down to hands-on. If you confront that guy out in front of that store and you're like, police, drop the weapon, or sheriff's office, drop the weapon, or whatever, and they drop that weapon, deadly force is out the window. So you still have to be prepared, right? You're still going to stay aimed in until you get back up there and you can get them secured. But you go from level 5 to level 3, or you go from level 5 to level 2, right? Now you're giving verbal commands to get them in a position of disadvantage so you can get them cuffed. So the way that it really should be taught is you can go from 1 to 5 to 3 to 4 back to 1, right? In any instance, and you don't have to follow it step by step. It's all based on what you're confronted with at that time. So the circumstances determine your level of force. It's not a step system that you have to follow up or follow down in all of the steps. It's determined by the circumstances. And here's the key. As quickly as you can escalate it, you can de-escalate it. And you need to. You need to be able to de-escalate. The whole purpose of the law enforcement profession is to protect and serve. And that means everybody, even the bad guys. I've said this before in another video. Sorry about the bumps. I've said this before in another video. Once that suspect is in custody, law enforcement is responsible for him. If they claim to have a medical issue, you have to call an ambulance. If they start breathing funny, you need to call an ambulance. If you get into a situation where you actually have to shoot somebody, first thing you do is secure them, so you cuff them. Yes, even though you shot them, you cuff them. Then the second thing you do is you have to render aid. You have to try to stop the bleeding. You have to perform CPR if necessary. You're required to do that. That's not an if. So we protect and serve everybody. I'm shaking again. Sorry about that. So again, we are not judge, jury, and executioner. We are simply the enforcers of the law. So once somebody's in custody, then you have to render aid. You have to help them if you can. And you have to continue to do that until rescue shows up and they take over. So those are the use of force steps, right? It's called the use of force continuum. Like I said, FLETC teaches it a little bit different. I don't necessarily agree with it. I just think that instructors got lazy and were teaching the use of force continuum, the 5 steps, in not the right way. They weren't taking the time to really explain it very well and making sure that officers knew that they did not have to go step by step every single time, that they could go from one level to and skip 3 or 4 levels and then back down. Now, the one thing that FLETC did explain that I want to tell you about real quick before I end this video is that they used to teach, and let me explain it. They used to teach hit them back first. Law enforcement officers do not have to wait to be struck first before they respond. If you're dealing with a suspect and you're telling him he's got to go to jail, and he says he's not going, and he's balling up his fist, and he's got the grimace look on his face, and he's giving you all the indicators that he's getting ready to fight, you can hit him with the OC. You can hit him with the taser. You can even possibly hit him with the impact weapon as long as you hit those green areas. Nothing says you have to let them attack you before you can bring the situation under control. The key is, can you articulate what's going on? He took a bladed stance, which is known as a fighting stance, a boxing stance. His fist became clenched. His face grimaced. His tone of his voice was as if it was angry and extremely excited, and he kept stating that he wasn't going to jail. all that combined together, if you can articulate that, will completely justify the fact that you went ahead and sprayed him or tased him, or you got him a couple times in the arm or the leg with the impact weapon in order to bring him under control. So there's no clear definition. This force must be used in this situation because everybody's different. All right, everybody believes that they can handle a situation differently. So that's the use of force continuum. We'll go into more detail later. And anyway, so hopefully you liked the video. Hit the subscribe button. Smash that like button for me. Hit the bell notification down there. Know when my next video is coming out. And I'll see you next time on In Pursuit 360. And y'all be safe out there.